Welcome to another episode of Heroes of the Heart. And the hero of the heart that I am speaking with today is Ajita Shah. And Ajita was raised in a family of medical doctors and was encouraged, sounds like strongly encouraged, to follow in the family business, family path. But her heart was leading her in a different direction. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience of one being raised in that family and kind of that decision to not follow on the same beaten path that your family had established?
Yeah, so, it was kind of generational. Both my grandfathers, paternal, maternal, my father, many uncles, many cousins, they were all medical doctors. And to be honest, Steve, when I was growing up, I thought it was a really cool profession. You are saving people's lives, you're making a massive difference. So I was enamored by that element of it, helping people. But, there was a practical side of not getting into medicine. My heart was not in it. In India, you have to actually make this massive decision at a very young age. There's a lot required. And I just didn't feel up to that. And my heart wasn't in it. I wanted the result, but that didn't seem like the right path. And yes, you're right. My family, my father was very disappointed. I was the firstborn, and he had lots of plans with me. He wanted to partner with me. He was very well known in the international medical community, and he wanted a lot of things, and he thought it would be nice to have his daughter by his side. Took a different route completely. I think he'll be proud now. He's been gone many years, though.
Wow. So and I'm thinking of a couple of things. One, how many of us wish that we had the opportunity to be in partnership with our parents, as it sounds like your father was expecting. And, I can appreciate that. It took me a long time to kind of get in line with my dad's path that he followed. And it actually didn't really start happening until after he'd passed away. And that was the path of an artist. And I had gone more the path of an accountant. And, I was determined to do everything that my dad didn't do. So there was that discord. And so I imagine there was, both the appreciation of having a father who it sounds like, really cared about you and cared about what you were doing and the potential of working together. But there was also I imagine, a division that came up when you said, I'm not going that path and we're not going to be partners in that way.
I don't think there was an obvious this division from a discord perspective. I think there was great disappointment. But my parents were also, they kind of watched us. And I think they realized that maybe I was not meant to. My father was very deeply spiritual, though he was very scientific in his approach. So there was a point that you made earlier with regards to not partnering with your father. And I think this happens when we're younger, right? I remember very distinctly thinking, my father doesn't really know anything. He's not very smart. I don't know why people think what they do about him. And, I know better, and you're a different generation. And, it's only when you're much older that you do realize that they had infinite wisdom, and you wish that you had sort of taken their advice a little bit more seriously. Your life probably would have turned out a little bit easier, at least. So I was definitely in that space. But like you, after my father passed, And he was gone when I was very young, and he was very young. So he was an eye surgeon as well. And so I have not managed to do it, but I think long and hard and very often about. So he used to set up what are called medical camps. So we lived in India at the time. They would go to rural areas, set up these free cataract camps. So, the 5 surrounding villages, people could come, they would set up tents, they would do surgeries, they were all free. Then 3 days later, they would, have some post-op stuff and give them spectacles and, so I keep wanting to set up those camps because I accompanied him on many of them, and I saw the great work they did and the blessings that they got from these people who would never have had an opportunity to be able to see, especially the older folk, to set up these camps in India and elsewhere where the need is. But it's still just a thought, and I keep hoping and praying that this will be the year when I can get it going.
That is a powerful story and legacy. I can imagine, and having obviously wearing glasses that, if I were to take my glasses off, I can see that there's a person on the screen, but that's all I can see. I mean, I am pretty blind without my glasses. And so, and both my parents got laser surgery when they were older and went from, glasses all the time and honestly cataracts, which is the main reason that they got the surgery. So to be able to go from not seeing to seeing is a pretty powerful experience.
Yeah, and also, I realized later in life, especially again with anybody for that matter, sight is so very important. Like, you're completely handicapped without, the sense of sight. And there's so much abuse that follows for people who are unable to see, whether they're children, and especially older folk. They become dependent financially on families because, they are either not working. And then on top of that, if they cannot see, they can't take care of their day-to-day things. There's a lot of abuse. So, and I'm talking about the time earlier or before the intraocular implants came. Right now, what they do is they take out the lens and they put in these artificial lenses. But this was before that, and so the glasses were very important, and they would look this really thick sort of soda glasses. In fact, my father was one of the first people in India to do intraocular surgery. I do recall that as well. But you're very right; it is very debilitating to not be able to see.
So the second thought that I have about that is, interestingly, as a spiritual healer and teacher, I imagine, this is the way my mind is thinking about it, is that you help people see in another way than, just physically, visibly. Is that accurate?
Wow, Steve, I've never sort of seen it in that light. It's never been put that way, but you're so right. It actually is. I say it's a paradigm shift, a change in perspective in many ways. And so it is seeing your life and yourself differently, and hopefully in ways that you realize how powerful you are and how many options you actually do have in life, which when we're caught up, we don't see.
Yes. Yes, and I can very much relate to that. I've been pretty religious most of my life, but there was a time in my life when my perspective, my foresight was extremely limited. I thought I was stuck in a job that I hated, that would have me crying Sunday afternoon and dreading going to work the next day. just doing everything I can just to keep doing what I felt that I had to do. And I did not feel like I had any options as to what I did. And it wasn't until I was honestly I was given a pink slip of opportunity. I was given the opportunity to leave. And I actually felt elated that I was leaving at that point. Previously, I'd not so much. But in that new state, in that new paradigm of finding myself and learning to see possibility where I hadn't seen possibility before, I now can look back at that time and see that, I had there were so many things that I wasn't seeing. There were so many things that were there that I was blind to.
Absolutely. Responsibility is a very binding space that we all come from, right? We've got families, you've got to make money, you've got responsibility towards your employer. And then we have extenuating circumstances within those broader parameters that are individual to our own families. And making money is a big thing, right? Vast majority of what we do to make money, to sustain and to thrive. When we're younger, what that looks like, comes from a very different place. It's not necessarily passion driven. It's not necessarily purpose driven. We're not so purpose driven when we're younger, right? But then as we go through life, the responsibilities on one side, and then your heart starting to speak to you and say, there is something else you need to do. And then there's that tug of war, because as you go to bed every night, your intuitive nature and that calling is really really loud in your ear. And then your responsibilities on the other hand are saying, no, but if you don't go to work, and then, what is going to happen? Are you going to feed your family, et cetera, et cetera? And I think that whole tug of war becomes a very difficult place for us. And we do come from a place where we feel that we don't have options. And perhaps in the short term, that is accurate. That if you suddenly stop working and you don't have a fallback plan, how are you going to support your family? Or, it even applies to, let's say, splitting with a partner that you've been with or for a long time or not. There's that sense of responsibility. There's that commitment that you made to them and to the society at large. And then you're like, oh, this is not working, but how do I leave? And we're caught up in that real discomfort. But whenever you take the decision, whether it's thrust upon you through a pink slip or the other partner decide, I'm going to leave, there's that, like you really speak of, there's that comfort that, oh my God, I'm free. You may not know what you're going to do with that freedom, but all of a sudden your heart is saying, oh, way to go, this is what you really need. And then when you start to think, and this really is a spiritual process, because then you dive more and more within, and all the answers are within us. And then, one door opens and one conversation and one idea, and you pursue, and it's not necessarily a straight line. It can be very sort of circuitous, but at the end of the day, here you are, smiling, happy, on purpose, Steve. I'm sure it was hard, but worth it. I have no doubt, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it was very hard. Excruciatingly hard. And there were many, many days when I did not feel like I was going to make it to the other side. And yet, from this side of that journey, I am forever grateful that I went through that journey, as painful as it was. Because if I hadn't, then I wouldn't be where I am today. And I wouldn't have the appreciation and the compassion for myself that I have today. And for that matter, for other people as well. Because we can't give what we don't have, right? If we don't have appreciation for ourselves, it's hard for us to appreciate other people we don't have compassion for ourselves, it's hard for us to have compassion for other people. And when we develop that, when we, get comfortable with this person in the suit, then everything begins to change, and our relationships with ourselves, our relationship with our community, our relationship with our work, it just becomes such a more beautiful and healing experience.
Absolutely. It is a journey of healing, right? We oftentimes people think that I brought this upon myself, or I got kicked out and, oh my God, now I'm saddled with this situation. But, again, spiritually, and then oftentimes when you look back, it is healing. It heals your heart. It heals your relationships. It brings you more into your power, and then you begin to heal other people, right? Through your work, you're spreading a lot of love and healing, and you're bringing people together that are within this space. So it is a healing journey, absolutely, and it starts with us.
Yes, which is so interesting because I think, like a lot of people, I spent most of my life looking out there for the answers, and thinking that I had to find it out there. And it wasn't until I started to look within that I really began to find the answers. I had lots of knowledge previously because, I was exploring all kinds of areas, but I didn't have much self-knowledge or self-appreciation.
Yeah, and we live in a world where there's incredible information around, and now, at the tip of our fingers, literally. So many of my clients that come to me have read all kinds of books, and they have been to all kinds of, taken courses, and but where we actually sort of fail, if I may use the word, is in the implementation. And the implementation's not easy because you have to take that information and make it relevant to each and every aspect of you. Mm. So it's a broad, generic, piece of wisdom. But then how do you take that and look at your entire life and your situations and your limiting beliefs and who you are and who you can be and all of that, and then start to make sense out of that, is not an easy process. And it's very hard to do on your own. And it takes a long time if you're going to do it on your own, because I did it on my own, and it was not a pleasant journey and not an easy journey, and took a very long time.
I can so relate to that. I love that we can find the answers within, right? That we can discover things about ourselves that help us to take the next step along our journey. But it's so much easier to make that journey when we have a guide to help us along the way. Because one of the ways that I look at it is, I'm pretty familiar with this aspect of who I am, but there are literally sides of myself that I have very little perspective of, because I don't see those sides of myself, whereas other people can see a more aspects of me that I'm not able to see myself, both flaws and strengths, and when we have a guide to help us along the way, they can help us put the puzzle pieces together more easily.
We also have a very stereotypical way of thinking, right? And we almost wear blinkers. Like, we've got our limiting beliefs, we've got our experiences, and we think that's sort of the be all and end all, and this is my blueprint, and this is it, this is my reality. Because I have so many clients who say to me, what does it mean to look within? Because really, we're so used to, whether you want to complicate this by talking about the ego aspect, which is really our mind aspect, right? But then you have to sort of forego and come into the heart, and it's a different language, it's a different way of looking at things. And we do not see ourselves in our truth, because oftentimes the truth can also not be so pleasant, right? For example, if I have anger issues, I am spending a lot of time looking away from that aspect. You know, my friends, my family, maybe my coworkers can see all of my triggers, but I don't want to, because acknowledging that is actually very painful for me. And so we try to, you know, disregard. And the healing journey is all about getting honest with yourself, all about accepting all of these shadow side of us that we, you know, that is the, sort of the technical term that we use, and then work through it. The why. Why are you like that? What happened to make you like that? And we have to also realize that if you are angry does not mean you're a bad person, or just because you are not as successful as somebody else that there's something wrong with you, you know, which is really sort of the message that we get throughout our life.
Yes.
And, you know, that becomes a point of reference. And that's what we sort of struggle with. But on the healing journey, we say, you are complete, you are gorgeous and beautiful. And these are some aspects that you can offload.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's wonderful that, one, I'm thinking about the word healing by itself, which is the same origin as whole or holistic or even wealth, that we already have the wealth within us. We already have the abundance and the love and the joy and the peace and all those things that we have a tendency to look out there for, but they're all right here. You know, and sometimes we just need to be awakened to that possibility, that reality, that we're not lacking anything. Even if, you know, we can look at our neighbors, you know, they've got a bigger house or a fancier car, or, you know, more initials after their name, or, you know, whatever it may be. That's their story. You know, that's who they are. And we can either, you know, appreciate where they are, or we can, you know, have compassion for those people who are struggling. And everybody on this planet is struggling in some way, just like we are. So, you know, I think it's a matter of getting clear on how do we appreciate the person sitting in our seat, not in comparison to somebody else.
Absolutely. That creates so much unhappiness and so much anxiety within us, because we are a world of comparison, you know, and it becomes much easier now to compare ourselves if that's sort of where you operate from, because we know what Elon Musk is doing, and we know what, you know, all of these people are doing, and then you have to, you know, end up saying, what have I done wrong? But closer to home, I think the whole idea of not being whole is in a relationship. And I think Bollywood and Hollywood has a lot to do with it, where we feel that the partner completes us, that I am one half of that equation. And so when marriages and partnerships break up, or when you're single and you do not have a partner, we have this sense that we're incomplete, we're not whole, something's missing, we're not good enough. And we have to remember that we're whole and complete in who we are. And when we partner with somebody, they complement us.
Yes.
It's that merger of two complete beings, right? And when you come from that place, then you look at your partner differently. The issues of codependency, which are so big in relationships, then no longer exist, or we can work through them. And at any point, if you have not found your partner or had to forego one, the damage within is far less, and you recuperate and heal and move on far easier.
Yes. Yeah. And again, I have personal experience of that too. I'm probably like most people. in the early stage of my marriage, we were pretty codependent upon one another. Um, and it wasn't until we actually split and went to two sides of the country, I in Oregon and she in North Carolina, that we became aware that while we really still had a lot of love for one another, that we were also independent beings. We were not part of a whole, we were each whole.
I grew up in a society where codependency, now that I look at it, it's codependency, is really the mark of especially from the woman's side, because, she's the giver and she's the one who sort of keeps everything together in terms of taking care of everyone. That martyrdom is condoned and appreciated and encouraged. And then you see your mother and your grandmother and, all of your aunts and uncles and people around you. If I'm honest, and it took me a while, that I was thriving in that very codependent role, while I was losing parts of myself because I had no opportunity or time to give to me. Subsequently, of course, I have unlearned a lot of that, and it also brings up a lot of resentment within your own heart, even though you're always there for people, but there's something that you can't really tell at the time that gets, you get upset, you get triggered. Had to work through all of that, and it's a much happier family, and and everybody is far more independent.
Yes. Yeah. And when we can be whole by ourselves, then we can be in better relationship with other people. It's a situation where 1 + 1 = 3, not 1 + 1 = 1, or even 1 + 1 = 2.
And I think it's very apparent outside of home in your purpose sphere. It definitely was for me, because my work required all of me and much more. Because it required me first to become a certain person. And then from there, I had the work to do and the path to walk. And I found that it was very impeding in my role as a mother and a wife, as being that 100% present person. And it took way longer for me to get to where I wanted to. I mean, we can always say that was a part of my journey, and it was, because I had lessons to learn that I was not willing to learn. I was not willing to see the situation from a different perspective. And therefore, I stayed in that spiral. And then, you sort of, it chips away at you. And if you believe in universe and the signs, and, and then they keep sort of sending you louder and louder signals, things start getting harder and harder. And then you have no choice but to say, okay, and I know you can relate to that. So, but I really think the more you own who you are, the less codependent you are, the more you see your wholeness, and you work through everything that's limiting. The place that's impacted the maximum is your purpose, which means the people that you serve them better, you serve more. And that joy within my own heart, I kick myself kind of every day. Why didn't you do this sooner?
Yeah, and that's really easy to do. What if I had started this journey earlier? What if I, not taken all the detours that I'd taken, or, stumbled when I stumbled? But if we had done that, if we had started earlier, and if we had just, followed the straight line, we wouldn't have all the richness of our experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I don't even believe, just speaking from my own experience, that there is a straight line. I mean, all of this stuff was very necessary. Each and every one step forward and 5 steps back, and all of the stuff that I did, and my stubbornness and not wanting to change. And there's still some situations and people that I hold on to that I so clearly can see are not serving me. But I don't believe there's a straight line at all for anybody.
Yeah. I'm reflecting on the conversation we had before we started recording about the necklace you're wearing, and kind of the yin and yang elements of that.
Yeah.
And there's lots of thought as to, what those two sides are. But what I'm thinking about is that both sides of those make the whole, right? That it's not, it wouldn't be the same thing as if it were all white or if it were all black, that the two are in balance with one another, and complementary to one another, that they inform one another, not necessarily in opposition to one another.
So the way we typically look at the yin yang is that there's a masculine side and a feminine side, and it fits in really well. And they're both equal size. There's not one bit larger than the other. But then there's another aspect, which I think is a truer aspect. This yin and yang again comes out of the earlier conversation we had of the merger of the man and the woman. I think originally the yin and yang really is because all of us have a feminine and a masculine energy within us. And that yin and yang really speaks to that balance within ourselves. So if our yin and yang is well balanced, then when we show up, we are very balanced.
Yes.
So that, I think, is the first aspect before we get into the other more romantic aspect of it.
Right. Yeah. And it's how do we create that balance within ourselves so that we feel complete, and that we can operate from a place of completion rather than a place of, well, I have to do this one more thing before I'm complete. I have to get here before I'm complete. I have to have this degree before I'm complete. There's all kinds of things that are calling to us externally, but I think the balance comes from finding that internal balance and internal harmony.
And actually, today being International Women's Day, one thing that I would really like to speak to from this topic is the yin and yang balance. So as a woman, I am more feminine energy, right? But the way society has evolved over the last 100 years, and the fight that the women have had to fight to own their place or re-own their place in the world, has actually moved us tremendously onto the masculine side, right? To survive in a boardroom or in a corporate structure, or pretty much most places, the feminine traits are considered weaknesses. So we donned the trousers and we started to, our mannerisms are very masculine. Our language has become very masculine. We have become quite aggressive because, we have a point to put forth and people are not willing to listen. And we've moved very much on that masculine side. And I think we really need to start as women going back to our feminine power, recognizing that the masculine power is not necessarily, and I say this with due respect to you, because I don't believe it's a competition. It's really complementary. Ideally, it should be. And that I can speak softly and I can be feminine and still be able to achieve the results that I'm trying. And I know more and more women are recognizing their power and coming into their feminine power and bringing their feminine power into whatever it is that they do. So that, and that's really that balance, Steve, that is so required in our world, in our society, because right now there's a tremendous imbalance, and it's creating all of these problems that we're all having to face: wars and hatred and scarcity and everything else.
Absolutely. And by the way, I don't find any, as a non-binary person, I totally embrace and welcome and encourage and do everything I can to, to find a way to bring more feminine energy into the conversation, into the world, into the business place, into, wherever, because we have swung for so long, the pendulum has been on the other side. And I don't think that's a healthy place. We need to have that balance internally, externally, between men and women, between our different aspects of ourselves, in order for us to be whole. Just going back to the yin and the yang, it's not just yin, it's not just yang, it's both. And when they can be in harmony with one another, when they can work together, complementary, not competitively or in opposition to one another, there's some beautiful things that can happen.
Exactly. We've got to forego that judgment that, men are better, the masculine way is better, they're smarter. I mean, there's all of that one has to contend with. It's different. Men are incredibly powerful and smart, and, they're creative, and then there's the feminine aspect. The woman is the life giver. She's creative. I mean, in different ways. And I think if there was on an architectural team, a male architect and a female architect, I mean, that project would be magic, right? Because and allowed to bring what they do and then amalgamate in some way. Those are phenomenal projects.
Yeah. You're reminding me of one of the architects that I have listened to most recently, actually transitioned from being very masculine in his roles to now being very feminine. Even though those two sides were present all along, they're now expressing that side of themselves in a beautiful way. And that kind of dichotomy reflected in all the work that they had done previously and in their more masculine identified, or honestly, it was interesting because it was, you are masculine, it wasn't I am masculine. And there was lots of conflict around that, but when they were able to express who they are, then there was a lot more internal harmony going on there. And that when we can have freedom to kind of draw from this side and draw from that side, that gives us access to more than if we're just on one side.
Exactly. And there's so much hope, because when you see the younger generation, they're not plagued by a lot of these things. They're very accommodating. They're very inclusive. They're not, they don't have a lot of these biases and judgments that, we have seen over the years. And they're creating a far more harmonious, one day at a time, one step at a time. It's not easy to turn the ship. But, when I speak to my son, and I'm sure you have the same experience with your children, I am so in awe of how incredible they are. And, this open source thing, I remember he was telling me, my son's an engineer, and he was telling me about this one person got an idea to help some disability. And he was young, so he got an idea and he did not have the capacity to see it through. So he put it out there and said, who can help me? And, from my generation, what would have ideally happened is somebody would have said, oh, brilliant, taken it home, worked on it, put their name on it and put it out there, right? Or the fear that, oh, I have this idea, if I put it out there, somebody else is going to run with it. But I think 200 engineers came together, they worked on it, they created that tool, and it was still his. He got the accolades, and I mean, it was a joint venture, but it was so heartwarming for me to see, that kind of collaboration and no selfishness in it. And so I'm always so in awe, and actually I have goosebumps right now just talking about it, that we're moving in a beautiful and a phenomenal direction. We're going to be better for who we are in the coming years.
Yeah, and I love the way that the collaboration can create such amazing things. That I was part of the collaboration for making this book, the Heart Notes anthology, which includes contributions from 29 different individuals. And I longed to be a published author forever. And it wasn't until we opened the doors and said, well, let's, invite everybody in. And it wasn't, even though, and I still find it a little ironic that, on Amazon, I'm listed as the author. When I get the reports, I'm the author, et cetera. But I honestly don't feel like it is. I definitely played a part in bringing it out, but it was a collaborative effort, just like you're talking about with the engineering project. That when we work together and use all of our resources rather than just, well, it has to have my name on it and I have to control it and, whatever, then again, we can create so much more than if we limit ourselves to having to have control over that expression of that creation.
Yeah, there's so many projects that are shelved because the individual is wanting to do it themselves. Either they don't have the time or the expertise or the money or are afraid, and I'm sure out of those, there might be phenomenal projects that would help humanity in so many great ways. So collaboration, but it's coming. So that's the great part.
So as we kind of wrap things up, I am wondering, two things. One, where is your heart leading you now? What's next for you?
There is so much happening so quickly. Steve, I've been a healer for many years, and I have done that as a service. But more and more, I've realized that people do not understand what healing is, how powerful it is, how necessary it is for each one of us. We go to the gym, we eat healthy. Now people are starting to go to acupuncturists and chiropractors, alternative therapies. We all need healing. And so my immediate sort of focus is to educate people on what that is. It's not a bad word. It's not that if you go to a healer, something's drastically wrong with you and you're also broken. How necessary it is for you to be a successful human being for yourself, and then if you are healed. So that's a very big focus for me right now. And I'm doing a lot of work around it. It is I'm inviting myself to become very vulnerable. So doing a little bit of work on myself through that, because I've been very happy doing my little work in my little way. But I'm having a lot of fun, a lot of people I'm meeting, collaborating with. And so that's sort of the focus right now.
That's beautiful. I'm reminded of something that I heard recently that I've never put together quite in the way that I'd heard it, but we just had the Winter Olympics recently. Every single one of those people who competed in the Winter Olympics didn't go there alone. They brought with them, each one of them had a coach, and if we think about healing in terms of the way you just express it, in being the fullest expression of ourselves, then, isn't that what we all want? Don't we all want to be the fullest expression of ourselves? And doesn't that provide the opportunity for us to open the door to more healers of all sorts in order to help us to get to that realization?
I think it's that transitional phase. You're absolutely right. So what happened back in the day, not very long ago, 20, 25 years ago, if you had to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, there was a great taboo. You didn't want to go, and if you went, nobody knew about it. Mindset coaching, is very big right now. A lot of people are very happily open to going to coaches, life coaches and mindset coaches to help them much more with their business, right? But at least there is that, the avenue is open that, okay, I can't do this on my own, and it's okay for me to seek help.
Yes.
And I think healing, there are two things. That's why I'm very keen to do what I'm doing, because people don't know what healing is, how scientific it is, and how transformative it is. So that's one aspect of it. And then when people start to realize and understand, and don't look at you as if me as a healer, I'm still afraid to own it. You and I have talked about it multiple times, because then people look at you and say, something must be wrong with her. Healer, what is that? And she's in some different dimension. And you have to own that, and you have to then start to educate people. So it's coming, right? The healing.
Yes.
And again, it's people like yourselves who have done their own healing, been through the journey, and are willing to have platforms like this, and then invite people like myself where we can talk about these things and make them much more normal and mainstream.
Yes. Let's keep opening that door to the more healing and more, just being who we are, being the fullest expression of who we can be. Well, thank you, Ajita, for sharing your heart and being a hero of the heart. You are making a wonderful difference in the world, and you've made a difference today.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a beautiful conversation. And I wish you all the very best with this endeavor. And, may you continue to spread your light.
Thank you. And with that, to everybody, be the bright light in someone's dark night.